Ole Miss is in the thick of it for two of the nation's best quarterback recruits. And we're also going to talk about the SEC and how it's going to play out this year. That's next here on The Portal.
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back into the Portal Podcast, where you get your daily recruiting, NIL, and transfer portal news. I'm your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football writer and recruiting analyst. Thank you for making the Portal Podcast your first listen each and every day. And we're going to be talking about Elite 11 finalists, Landon Duckworth, and we're going to talk about Ryder Lyons. We're going to talk about all the recruiting stuff that Lane Kiffin and the Rebels have going on for the quarterback position. It's fascinating. And after we get done with all the recruiting stuff, we're also going to talk about the SEC schedule. There are a couple of teams that are getting the short end of the stick, talk about where Ole Miss fits into all that and how that's going to play out in the Southeastern Conference. To make it all happen, my guy right here, Mr. Steven Willis, locked on Ole Miss. Like you've seen the SEC forever. I can't wait till we get to the end to talk about that. The schedule, how it balances each year, with quarterbacks transfer and all that. This is going to be a unique year, especially for one school. I'll leave it for later. I feel bad for them. You and I were just talking about them off air, but there are some critical years for that. But first, as I noted at the top of the show, Landon Duckworth and Ryder Lyons are the conversation pieces. And Steven, once again, thank you for coming on the show. But I saw Landon this past weekend in the greater Atlanta area at Gainesville High School, and it was Elite 11. He actually didn't get invited to the finals yet, but he'll get invited. I'm pretty confident of that. He's super talented. Kid out of Jackson, Alabama, 6'3", measured in 193 pounds. He came in third on the accuracy challenge. He can make all the throws. Great kid, traditional Southern kid. Ole Miss, right now, I am steadfast that they are the team to beat. He really didn't hide away from that. When I interviewed him, he got right to the point. I said, who you got for visits, all that. And Ole Miss gets the last visit. By the way, I like that. It's June 20th. I'll come back around to that. But he said he had the best relationship with the Ole Miss staff. As a rule, that is a sign of things to come. Stranger things have happened. NIL is a part of this era. I get it. I make far fewer predictions because of that name, image, and likeness scenario. I get it. But right now, if he had to sign today, there is no doubt in my mind it would be Lane Kiffin and the Rebels. And before anybody asks, no, this isn't because of their NIL. Steven talks about this all the time on Locked On Ole Miss. They've got decent NIL, but they don't have like Oregon, Texas, Florida. It's not the same deal. It's relationship built, and he also understands this is an intelligent young man talking about Landon Duckworth. I'm going to get developed at the quarterback position. You can say whatever you want about Kiffin. You can hate him on X. By the way, I love him on X. I think he's hilarious. But you cannot doubt the fact that he understands how to coach the quarterback position. Players notice. So with that, Steven, I want your take. I'm sure you've watched Duckworth's tape multiple times. Then I'll give my overview of what I liked about him at Elite 11 thereafter.
One thing that stood out to me, the first thing that grabbed my attention looking at his tape, is he was a drop back pass from his own 1 yard line that ended up on a scramble that ended up in a 99-yard touchdown. That was the first thing that got my attention. The next thing, surprisingly, was the mid-range game. Now, his deep balls, you see at the high school level, you see a deep ball that's usually pretty good because that's what the kids work on. They like throwing the ball downfield. You also in the middle is going to be a little bit hard to find, and the low yardage is going to be really good for young quarterbacks. So that mid-range game is something really interesting. And Landon led his highlight tape off with a mid-range pass. And it's like, okay, that's good. And you saw the accuracy and everything going around. His athleticism, really great. I like to compare him to big, tall, fast quarterbacks of the past. He has a little RG3 in what he does. He has a little bit of that Lamar Jackson to his game, a little bit. Not quite the athlete of him, but he has it in his toolbox. And that's the reason he's the number one high school quarterback that Ole Miss is recruiting. And Ole Miss is going completely all out for him. We did shows on, I think it's Keyshawn Henderson, and all the quarterbacks that we're going through. Landon Duckworth has consistently been on that list, and has gotten more and more important over the last couple of months, to the point where when he was there at junior day, I think he's already been to a spring practice. You say follow the visits. That's what's going on here. Whenever they do that much to get to your school, that's worth talking about. And Duckworth is somebody that sees how Jackson Dart got developed by Lane Kiffin. They put on film of Jackson Dart in 2022. They put on film of Jackson Dart in 2024. And that just blew the socks off of Landon Duckworth and Ryder Lyons as far as what Joe Judge, Charlie Weiss, and Lane Kiffin can do in the quarterback room. And that's the reason that I think Lane Kiffin is thinking about. It's the early stage, and Landon Duckworth is the key to it. But I think that Lane Kiffin is trying to construct his own super team, so to speak, in recruiting, starting with a Landon Duckworth at quarterback, and then he's going to try and reel in Tristan Keys. Then he's going to try and reel in the Xavier McDonald. He's going to try and get Felix Ojo. He is going to try and work offensively to where it is a super team, and Landon Duckworth is the key to that. He's a really, really good quarterback, and in the end, it's probably going to be a fight, and there's going to be some sweating if he does indeed commit to Ole Miss, but he's worth it.
I would agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm going to give you my overview of what I saw at Elite 11. They put kids in situations to make them feel uncomfortable, to use your word, make them sweat.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes he was good, sometimes he wasn't. What I was more interested in is like they'll do a rep and then they'll correct something that a young man does. They don't, like Faison Brandon was there. The kid committed to Tennessee. Some companies have him number one player in the country. Like he's elite as it gets. He would make an error. They corrected him just like they did the kid that's at the bottom of the barrel. They didn't care. I love that about Elite 11. So when Duckworth did something wrong, he would take the coaching and make an adjustment. That's important. A lot of kids that I'm not going to go through names. Some of the guys that I've been to a ton of these Elite 11s, they get really, really touchy about it. Like, how dare you correct me? Imagine that guys that, get paid to coach quarterbacks. But teenagers can be that way. He didn't care. And he would go on. That was a good sign for me. And then I wanted to see his arm strength live. It's different to see, like, I wish I had seen Nolan Ryan pitch when I was a kid. Like, seeing it on TV was pretty awesome, but seeing it live would have been better. Seeing a quarterback in their arm strength, John Elway or whoever it is, I never saw it. I would have loved to. Duckworth's got a gun. And he's a guy that, like you said, if you screw around and you rush him, that's okay. But you better hit him. That first guy better not miss. So anything that he does in the passing game is elevated by the fact 3rd and 8, if you have 3 guys in front of him, it still may end up being 1st and 10. You can never forget that. He can make more errors in the passing game, and he's already elevated his passing ability beyond what I thought he did. Now, he still has a ways to go. I don't think he's a 5-star guy. He's got some development. But this is a lot like what Jackson Dart was. He was a kind of similar player. Obviously, Jackson could run, and that's why he's continued to get back, got stronger, faster, understanding system under Kiffin. This is a guy that could take the same trajectory. We're going to come back to Jackson Dart here in a little bit with Ryder Lyons because, ironically, Jackson's a guy that he talks to. He's doing his homework. He's a smart kid. I know Ryder Lyons, too. He's a really smart kid. But I think I had a little bit more of a broader sense of Duckworth based on what I saw at Elite 11. I don't care about the arm as much as I do some of the other intangibles, but he has the arm too. Like, it's better than what I thought. You can't lie when you're 10 feet in front of me. So he can zip it on a short slant. And when they asked him to roll, he's a right-handed quarterback. When they asked him to roll to his left and throw, it doesn't bother him. Like, he's a kid that could play third base or shortstop and make that awkward throw across the diamond. You know what I mean? That either you can do that with God-given arm strength or you can't. He has it. And he didn't care how they coached him. They wanted a high, low, whatever. If he made an error, he came back and did what he was supposed to. So I understand why Lane wants him. And this is maybe the most critical part of our interview. I asked him about, why he liked Ole Miss and all that. And he talked about development. I'm sure part of his decision will be NIL. Like, why wouldn't it be? But he brought up on his own accord development. Again, say whatever you want about Lane. He can be a pain in the butt. He prods people and does all that stuff. When it comes to actually coaching quarterbacks, it's not that big a deal. So I'll give a little more commentary on what he told me about Lane when we come back. But I'm higher on Duckworth than I was before. When we come back, I'll give a little story about it. I was shocked at something that he said about Lane. That's next here on the Portal Podcast. And we're going to have some fun with the quarterback recruiting. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're into plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product information to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free TradeMaster program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the TradeMaster program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies in just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That is supplyhouse.com. Steven, if I told you Landon Duckworth communicated to me that, believe it or not, Lane Kiffin's really quiet, would you be surprised by that? I was.
Not even a little bit, because
Really?
the personality on Twitter does not match the personality of the man.
That's great, because it matches what Landon told me. And I was like, really? He goes, no, I'm serious. He's pretty quiet when I'm around him. Yeah. I was like, okay. And I was just so far taken back. I didn't even know what to counter for a secondary question. But he said that's just who he is when he's around him. They talk ball, little small talk, but that's about it. I was like, okay, fair enough.
Yeah. Lane Kiffin is a guy that is comfortable in his own skin. He's not that loudmouth that his reputation is on Twitter. He's kind of a different cat. He's very much a generalization thinker and very much an analytical person. And when you see that doesn't match with his Twitter account, that could throw you off. But I mean, that is reality. I think Twitter in a lot of ways is him acting like maybe a way that he wishes he could act like. Whenever his personality's like that, maybe it's wish casting a little bit because it doesn't match completely his personality.
Well, I mean, it was interesting when I was talking to Duckworth about Kiffin. He smiled and he's like, believe it or not. And like, Duckworth's a really reserved guy too. Very quiet and unassuming. He's not brash at all. And he was kind of surprised by it as he's gotten to know Kiffin, but they get along well and they communicate quite a bit. So I thought that was really interesting as a backstory, because I thought he was going to say something to the effect of Kiffin, kind of shows off or says funny things to try to get him to be attracted to him in the Ole Miss program. Not at all. I missed that by a mile. So good to know. I'm glad you backed that up too. So that shows there's consistency with it. Obviously, a lot of people around the Ole Miss program. So that's pretty unique. Next up on the totem pole here, we've talked about Ryder Lyons before, but now is a really critical point. This is arguably, forget Ole Miss for a second, just looking at it from a totality standpoint. Ryder Lyons is a quarterback out of Folsom, California. It's near Sacramento in the northern part of the state. Elite guy, 6'2.5", 225 pounds, super athletic. He's shredded. He's a kid that could be the CEO of a company. He's LDS, so he's got a religious factor in his recruitment. NIL, as you and I were discussing off air, is certainly a part of it. Talked about, if you're going to commit to me in development, all that, commit to me with NIL and all that. And as I noted with LDS, he's going to take a mission, but most kids take 2 years. Unless something has changed in the last 10 minutes, he's taking a 1-year mission. So while he is rated a highly ranked and most likely 5-star by anybody that's seen, if you've seen him play, you're going to rank him a 5-star. He's an elite player. He's a kid that's going to sign in December, but take a mission, then enroll at that school a year later. So he's essentially a 27 player. And Steven and I were discussing how hypothetically, it's not out of the question that you sign Duckworth, then you sign Ryder Lyons. It's possible. Or another school signs a really good quarterback that gets like, we don't know. And I'm not sure, because I haven't spoken to Ryder in so long about this on the phone. I message with him once in a while, but this is a deeper conversation. Are you looking at who signs in 26 at said schools? Do you care if they sign an elite kid this year? It's a touchy conversation because kids don't want to look bad. So I lose either way by asking. He can't answer it honestly, but it's a really important question. So, Steven, what is your sense about what's going on? I think he's at Ole Miss today, if I'm not on Wednesday.
I think it's a multi-day trip. I think he arrived Wednesday night. He was at practice Thursday morning.
Right.
And I think they're heading out Friday morning at some point. And I think they're going from there to either Ohio State or Michigan.
Yeah, they're going to go to those two schools. Yeah, I forget the order, but it's one than the other. So here's the scenario with him. This is what he has now. This is from 24/7, and this could have changed, but his official visit schedule as of today, Southern Cal on June 6th, I'll come back to them, Oregon June 13th, and then BYU, in my opinion, the team that's the easiest pick if you're going to, again, he's LDS, is June 20th. Now, two caveats. USC already has Jonas Williams out of the Chicago area, and he does not suck. Like, that is a really, really good football player. He'll be in the Elite 11 finals, too. That's a lock. Oregon is in the Jared Curtis sweepstakes. We don't know exactly what's going to happen there, but he's going to play for the Dogs or the Ducks. So wild because they're so far apart, so different in a lot of ways, but yet Dan Lanning was obviously there at Georgia before he took the Oregon job. So him and Kirby know each other well. And then BYU, again, it's LDS. I'm going to make a statement here, and I don't know where Ryder is going. I haven't asked him lately about anything recruiting. We just talk football stuff. I think if he had to pick today, it would be BYU because he's so confused on what's going on with depth charts at other schools. It's the default pick. Again, he's LDS. He just visited there again. And no offense to BYU, they don't have the same depth chart that Ole Miss does or Oregon does or Southern Cal does. They don't. So it's the easy pick. And I know I'm going with the low-hanging fruit. I think the biggest fly in the ointment is Ole Miss because of the same reason I talked about with none other than the guy we just got done discussing, Landon Duckworth. It's development. If you want to say, well, what about Riley out of USC? That they're the two best, in my opinion, to the quarterback position. They're the guys that are going to get players in contention for all conference and Heisman contention with how they run their offenses. So how does the visit end up and how does he end up comparing it? I can't see Ohio State because they got too many guys and they recruit the spot so well. I could be wrong, and he can absolutely play there. I'm not saying that he can't. It's just harder path to playing time. The other one that I'm curious about, but they run it a lot, is Michigan. I just think they run the ball too much for what he's going to want to do. If I was a quarterback, I'd be a little hesitant. They're going to run the ball 60% of the time or more. Not many 5-stars dig that. So we'll see how that goes. But what is your take on where Ole Miss stands with Ryder Lyons?
I think Ole Miss is probably the best fit out there for him out of those schools.
He very well could be there.
Yeah.
I agree. That's why it's so fascinating.
You have the Lane Kiffin and the offensive thing, and Ryder absolutely loves it. His wide receiver from Folsom is a commit right now to Ole Miss.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. And you look at the development. He mentioned it in the thing that Jackson Dart's development from 2022 to 2024 as part of the presentation that I'm sure they're about to give. Now, Ryder Lyons is going to pick 2 official visits out of his last 3 unofficial visits. So between Ole Miss, Ohio State, and Michigan, he's going to pick 2. And I think it's going to be, like Brian said, Michigan, and I think Ole Miss is going to get the other one. And if he returns to Oxford, if Ryder Lyons returns to Oxford, it is a 50-50 proposition that he's going to sign there.
It wouldn't shock me. How BYU handles it with the NIL and all that is the wild card because, again, I'm not trying to pick on BYU. They got a heck of a football coach. I think he's vastly underrated. They do a heck of a job with what they get. Steven, when was the last time we talked about BYU in any capacity with the words 5-star? I don't care what the position is. And he's an LDS kid, elite personality. Like, he is the carbon copy of what, like, Merrill Lynch would want for an advertisement. He's that astute. And he's in your face.
He's Jackson Dart.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what I'm going to get to. They speak to each other. he openly talks to Dart about how does this work? You're a kid from Utah. It's not pure West Coast like I am, but it's still out there. How did you adapt? What do you like about it? Like they talk. So that's another advantage for the Rebs. And I'm just fascinated by, like you, if he takes the OV, all bets are off. But what would Ole Miss have to do to counter the offer that I think, and I don't have any insight on this from a factual standpoint, I think BYU's NIL offer will be, except for maybe, or if they lose to Jared Curtis sweepstakes, maybe they can have the highest. But otherwise, I think it's BYU because they're not going to get a shot at a 5-star otherwise.
I think that I have a theory that is that of a sliding scale for NIL. For instance, Georgia does not have to pay as much as Mississippi State to get the same player.
100%.
Yeah. So the better you are, the less you have to pay. So if BYU offered him, I don't know, 2.5 hypothetically, I haven't even heard that number. I think Ole Miss could probably get him for 1.5 at that point. Just because of the SEC and stuff like that. I do believe in that sliding scale. So if there's going to be a big number, and if it is all about the money, if it ends up being there, the kid's going to end up at BYU because BYU is going to have to pay more money to make that sliding scale work.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, would they go all in? Like, and I'm not trying to tell them what to do. Hint, pay a lot because you're not getting another chance. That's how I look at it. It'd be cool for BYU to be a team that could make the playoff and all that if they had a 5-star. That'd be cool. But, like, who's he going to be playing with as compared to, like, again, I'm not trying to be mean, but if you compare the depth chart at tight end and wide receiver and offensive tackle, 3 critical spots for what happens at Ole Miss, and compare it to BYU, it's not close. It's just not. So I'm sure that's something that Kiffin and crew are preaching during the visit and will continue to preach until Ryder Lyons comes to a conclusion. Steven, when we come back, we're going to talk about something that is absolutely polarizing to me. You and I don't have anybody in the race on this one in terms of one school we're going to talk about, but this is an overall SEC scheduling debate where Ole Miss sits in it, how it could challenge for the SEC championship game and ultimately the college football playoff. That is next here on the Portal Podcast. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. For instance, you can have a scenario where you have something that just nickels and dimes you to death, but you don't really pay attention to it. But if you have Monarch Money's app, it'll help you with stuff like food delivery and all the little things that you spend on that add up. And you can do the same thing with your partner. Keep it in one place with Monarch Money and their app so you can set goals and have more financial security. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Steven, the SEC schedule for Ole Miss, I think, has a little gap there in the middle. We talked about that last week on the show. That's difficult. I didn't even pull up Ole Miss's schedule because I don't think it's in the stratosphere with what I want to start with right now. Like last year, there was a lot of discussion about the Gators. They got hosed. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. Now they're rivals with Georgia, so that kind of sucks. Like that's, over the last 5 years.
And them adding UCF to the schedule, and some of it was that, and Miami. A lot of that was their doing too, but they did get hosed on the conference schedule too.
Yeah, you got Ole Miss and OSU, etc. All these teams towards the back, like you just get beat up. I mean, they beat some teams we didn't necessarily expect, but like just looking at holistic, like, man, this is tough. Well, if it's possible, if you look at the back end of Oklahoma's schedule, and I'll pull it up and put it on the screen here for those on YouTube in just a moment, but I'm just going through it. And Steven and I, just off the top of our head, we didn't even have this up before the show started. Full disclosure. We're like, is Oklahoma's schedule worse than Florida's? Like, because you and I talked about Florida later. Like, I felt and I have no love for Florida. I don't. I'm not a Florida guy at all. But I'm like, this is dumb. This is really dumb. But Georgia is pretty much out of the major programs, the only one the Oklahoma Sooners miss. But on the other side, I mean, the chances of them making the SEC title game are about the chances of either me or Stephen Duncan a basketball today. It's not happening, okay? It's not happening. You got Texas, you got LSU. That's not a good start right off the bat because both those teams, based on what I saw from Oklahoma's I saw them play live. Their offense makes me want to hurl. Those teams are going to score a lot of points. So that's going to be tough enough. But they have Auburn. This year, they at least get Auburn home. Auburn's going to score a lot. They got receivers. They got Tennessee. How do you navigate that when you're in year 3 and it is the hottest of hot seats in Norman? Like their fan base is crazy and it's rabid and all that, just like Ole Miss. But I think they have an elevated sense of where they should be. Like it is my job to study rosters. 24/7, that is what I do. Roster management is basically my job. Recruiting, NIL, and the portal. Their roster is not in the stratosphere with what like LSU has or Ole Miss has. It's not. It's getting better, and defensively, their coaching staff's elite. But can they score? They bring in a big-time transfer quarterback. I get that. But you got all these moving parts. You had all these receivers hurt and transferred out. Steven, did Oklahoma, A, get hosed as much, if not more than Florida? And B, you mentioned something to me, but you think there's an upset brewing. Why don't you give me your take on both those things with Oklahoma?
I think that there's several things that can be true about Oklahoma. First off, they did not handle the line of scrimmage on either side before they came to the SEC. And they were behind the 8 ball to begin with. Their offense didn't quite work out. They had a ton of injuries. They should have been a lot better than they were. But Brent Venables isn't what Bob Stoops was, what Lincoln Riley was at Oklahoma. It's a different type deal. Anytime there's a system change, it's going to be problematic. So now they're bringing in the offensive coordinator from Washington State that's kind of a hybrid between the run and shoot and the true passing spread and all that. And John Mateer's a really good quarterback. And I think they're going to score some points. Their defense is going to be legit regardless. But I do not think that they're going to be anywhere near where they want to be. This is like a 7-win Oklahoma team. That even best case scenario, 7 wins. Now the upset brewing that I think they have, I think they're going to beat the Texas Longhorns. I think Texas is a low-key 7-5, 8-4 type team. This is going to be a more evenly matched up football game than it normally is. And especially having the game at South Carolina, that Texas game is one that they need to get, and they need to figure that out before that last stretch, because I think if you ask Brent Venables, put the truth serum in him, he thinks he can get Alabama because he beat them last year. Missouri he thinks he can get, and LSU he thinks he can get. And that's how I think he thinks he's going to be able to save his job.
Well, here's the schedule for those of you that are not on YouTube. And I'm just going to give the date and the team and where the location is. It's straight across the board. On the 11th of October, we're just going to go to October, just down in it. They got other tough games, but they've got Texas in the Cotton Bowl, the traditional Red River rivalry. A week later, they got to go to Williams-Brice and play the Gamecocks. We both know that's a nutty place, and they actually have a pretty decent team. A week later, they come back home, but they get Ole Miss. A week later, they go to Tennessee and Rocky Top. Like, that is a 4-game stretch of hell. Mm-hmm. I mean, if they go 2-2 in that, they'd probably be ahead of the curve. Off week. Okay, we're good to go. Oh, well, not really. Your last 3 games are at Alabama, Missouri, and then they got LSU at home. Bro, for a 7-game stretch.
Yeah, it's brutal.
That is crazy. But here's the thing. People are, I don't know if I buy this. I want your take on it. This is the second team I want to talk about. South Carolina is a team that was on the border of the playoff last year, along with Ole Miss. Like, they were right there together. Oklahoma might be the team. Like, if they go in to Williams-Brice and win, would it shock me? No. Why? South Carolina finds a way to shoot itself in the foot more than any program in the Southeastern Conference. They have for decades. I need to see it. Secondarily, they have a chance at the end of the year because LSU will be a perennial power in all the preseason rankings. They'll probably be good. They get LSU at home. Are they going to do to LSU what they did to Alabama last year?
Possibly.
I mean, they have a chance to influence so many games. It's not even funny. And again, they play Ole Miss too, and it's at Norman. They could cause a scenario where it ends up being a really difficult deal for Oklahoma to not be considered a team that is, I don't know, the spoiler, if you will, because both of them are so darn talented, talking about the coordinator and the head coach and the defensive staff and the offensive coordinator brought it. It looks good, but they got so many parts that are moving in, Steven. I'm not sure it's going to work. So I have a feeling they're going to be the roller coaster team in the league that doesn't even sniff the SEC title. This is my prediction, but they're going to screw somebody over. It's just a matter of who is it, and maybe it's more than one. So, like, Ole Miss fans don't like Oklahoma's defense last year was legit.
Yep.
They've got guys up front, and they can, like, Venables knows how to scheme up blitzes, and he saves stuff. Like, he used to mess with Saban like the champ. He always saves stuff. Oh, coaches don't do that. Baloney. They absolutely do that. So, who's the other team? Like, Oklahoma's my pick is the team that's just raw, that I think is just goofy. We don't know what's going to happen. Do you have somebody else that think they're probably not going to make it to Atlanta, but they're going to screw somebody over and get that big upset?
And probably Florida.
That's the one I was going with second too.
Yeah. But that I'd say probably Florida if Lagway's shoulder is healthy in this season.
Yeah, he seems to get beat up a lot. And he's a big kid. Like you and I have been around. Like, he's a big dude. But if he's not healthy, they're going nowhere. And their schedule, again, it's not, I think it's a teeny bit below Oklahoma's, but remember the SEC schedule last year, it's just flipping, meaning if you played that team at home, now you play them on the road. The back end of their schedule is gross again. Yeah. And you never know, Florida State might be a little better. They got to play at Miami and the SEC slate. So the Gators
at Ole Miss, at LSU.
Those two, like, again, obviously Ole Miss has got that sucker circled. Now Lane will deny that like every head coach. He'll lie like every other coach. There's no way he doesn't have that game circled.
Right.
LSU, that's a rivalry game anyway. If they can win in Tiger Stadium, they're used to playing there and all that. It wouldn't surprise me. Billy had time in the state of Louisiana. That's a big deal to him. That's the one I have circled. I don't think they'll win at Ole Miss. I think they have a better chance at winning at LSU because there's just a comfort because they know each other's rosters and all that. I think that's more likely. If there's anybody else that I'm curious about, it's Missouri because they're finally changing quarterbacks. How is that going to go? They've got some pretty talented players at the skill spots. They went and got Damon Wilson from Georgia, the pass rusher, who's really good. If they win 10 games, it wouldn't shock me. But if they went 8-4 because of the quarterback switching over, it also wouldn't shock me. Anytime you get a transfer in, they got the Privy kid from Penn State, etc., there's always a possibility things go really well or really bad. I'd be nervous about, and I'm not a gambler, but if I was a gambler, Missouri would make me very, very nervous from a holistic perspective. I'd want to see them a little bit first. Just my take.
Yeah, and does Vandy take a step? I'm not talking about win the SEC. Does Vandy take it that next step that they need to do? Because if that happens, they could wreck Tennessee. Somebody will get gotten by Vanderbilt.
Well, they got the quarterback back, and I saw that game last year against Auburn. Saw him play a little bit. He's just kind of clutch. They didn't have the playmakers, but he'd make the third down plays that just drive you up a wall. Somebody screws around with him like Bama did last year. They took him for granted and got their heads beat again. That's what happens. You can lose. So I think this year, if it's possible, the SEC will be more topsy-turvy than it even was last year. And that is saying something. So anyway, I always love talking about SEC football schedules. But this year, you got Oklahoma and Florida, Missouri, teams that we're not sure about, but there's reason to think they're at least going to jab somebody. Now the question is, which one's it going to be? Steven, tell everybody where they can find your work, my friend.
You can see me on the YouTube channel at Locked On Ole Miss or wherever you get your podcast, Locked On Ole Miss. Give me a comment. Give me a subscription. Subscribe to the channel, both audio and video. That'd be awesome. You can follow me on social media. And you can follow Brian Smith on the Locked On Ole Miss podcast starting, I think, April 14th, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. He's going to be hooking all you Loomers up. So if you want to check some more Brian Smith, he's going to be right there for everybody.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm kind of looking forward to get to talk SEC every day kind of thing. So nothing wrong with that. You can find the Portal Podcast on YouTube at the Portal Podcast. You can get us on Odyssey, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, everywhere you get your pods. You can find us on social media. I'm happy to talk anything recruiting, NIL, or transfer portal. Please like and subscribe. We will see you again soon.